EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. I can see that you are all in very good shape, refreshed after last night's party, which was a real highlight of the day, wasn't it, Emily?
It was very nice. First greeted by the jazz band on this large ship, and then I also got an invitation to ride on an icebreaker.
Did you?
Well, not really. I got invited to visit the company in Helsinki, but I turned that into an invitation to ride on an icebreaker, right?
Very good. What I thought was impressive is that given the sunset is so late, you feel as if the party was just starting, and then several hours into it, you look at your clock and your watch, and you realize it's actually quite late. But we hope you all very much enjoyed it last night. And I suppose if we were to extract one message from yesterday, it was the new normal that the report on State of the Region spoke about. So just to do a little exercise, I wanted to ask you what you thought about it, because it was a subject of many heated discussions during the day and in the evening. So I want to ask you whether you think we will have to embrace this new normal of higher growth than elsewhere in Europe, but still relatively low. Second of all, whether we will manage to challenge it. And third of all, if any of you think that the new normal assumption is too optimistic, that in fact we will have more difficulties than this scenario suggests. So A, B, C, if you could please raise your hands, who thinks that we'll come to live with the new normal? Please raise your hands. Yes, this is quite a few. Who thinks that we will manage to challenge the new normal and we will return to higher growth in the region?
Almost the same?
Yeah, slightly fewer perhaps, but almost the same. And who thinks that the new normal assumption is too optimistic, that in fact there will be many more difficulties ahead, whether in the region or outside?
Ooh.
Very good. I think we got an equilibrium between the three scenarios. So that means that's a good omen for today, because it means we still have to discuss vividly how to challenge the future. Very good. Emily, what's in your view were the main takeaways from yesterday?
Yeah, from the first two plenary sessions, it's as you were saying, the first one was very much focused on the State of the Region report and the new normal, and what is that? And a little bit, what did Christians say? Still proud, but not exuberant about the region's performance, that we have to get accustomed to this new normal with lower growth or slower growth and decreasing in inward investments and things like this. It's a bit put us in our seats in a realistic picture, but also we got some recommendations on focusing on the digitization, looking at digital growth, and looking at new forms of employment and mobilization of the youth in the economy. And then we got some new kind of concepts to embrace with Vappavuori, who introduced us to the concept of macro-regional value chains. And in the second plenary, we had an introduction of various parallel sessions. We got introduced to the 10 Commandments from Minister Stubb, the 10 Commandments of the Baltics region strategy, and progress on those. And those were looking like we were making some decent progress on implementing the macro-regional strategy. We also got another new concept from Minister Niinistö about greening the economy. Green the economy. So we were invited to combine our thoughts about environmental sustainability and growth, that those two concepts could be combined. And then my favorite tweet of the day, I need to highlight this, is from UBC Environment, tweeted that yellow pants are the new black. So this is definitely a highlight from the first two sessions, I thought.
Emily, I hope that we will have some speakers today in yellow, green, or red pants. I think we're quite liberal about that. But we will see who will have the courage. Well, the second part of the day was very much about the digital agenda. And we learned that our region is a powerhouse in this area. The Microsoft executive, Craig Shank, told us that we are among the 3 regions in the world where software development is most advanced. South India, he said, Shanghai and the Baltic Sea region. These are the places where things are happening on the digital agenda. Our biggest asset is clearly the talents we have. We need to cherish that. Nothing is cast in stone when it comes to talent. We also need an activist approach to the digital agenda. The Estonian Prime Minister told us it's not enough to put a PDF on the web. You actually need to make the data available so that the citizens have a living instrument to work with. So at the end, I thought we reflected on the role of the region when it comes to the digital agenda. And it seems to me that there are 3 possibilities. Either we adopt a do-it-yourself model, namely we advance the digital issues ourselves and don't really care much about the rest. Or we form coalitions of the willing. So we try to cooperate with each other at least and then move things forward. This was the example of the way Estonia and Finland work together. And the third option is more ambitious, namely that we become a real champion of the digital agenda in the European Union in the next cycle. And I think we had one front runner there speaking very clearly about it yesterday, which tempts me to ask you another question, namely, who thinks that one of the top jobs in the European Union in the next 5 years will go to the region? President of the European Commission, President of the European Council, or High Representative? Who thinks that we will get one of these jobs? Very good. Well, I think we have a majority there, so we should know Herman Van Rompuy immediately after this session that he needs to choose one of us. Emily, before I ask you to introduce the next session, I would like to remind everyone that there are 4 excellent reports available at the Baltic Development Forum stands, some of which we spoke about yesterday. The Micro-Multinationals report, the State of the Region report, Making Water Your Business report, and one which will be discussed during today, Political State of the Region. So stay tuned to these discussions, and also you'll be approached during the break with an evaluation form. This is an important part of the exercise. It's about feedback. There are also questions about who should get the award for 2004 for a special deeds, special commitments to the Baltic Sea region. So please pick it up during the break.
Yes. So now, the first part of today, we will be discussing, as Commissioner Hahn introduced yesterday, a recently released report from the Commission about the governance of macro-regional strategies. And these are about the governance of all of the macro-regional strategies. But this morning's discussion will be focused on how we in our macro-region can move from commitment to action, talking about the governance, the leadership, and the implementation of the strategy. This session is going to be moderated by a colleague from Finland, Mr. Timo Rajakangas, and he will be joined by a prestigious panel of speakers. I'm going to welcome everyone up on stage at the same time. Commissioner Johannes Hahn, Minister Erkki Tuomioja, the Finnish Minister of Foreign Affairs, and also the current president of the CBSS, Pavel Telicka, the European coordinator of the North Sea Baltic 10T Core Network Corridor. I guess they're getting all mic'd up. We have Aleksandra Zakrzewska from the Ministry of Infrastructure and Development, replacing the person in your program. And Mr. Arvo Veskimets, the Director General of the Marine Environment Department of the Ministry of Environment in Estonia. So as soon as these people are mic'd up, they will be joining us on stage.
But we can give them a warm welcome already.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Mister. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Sure, of course.
Yes. So Timo, we hand it over to you.
Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Minister, panelists, dear ladies and gentlemen, friends of the Baltic Sea and the Baltic Sea region. I was amongst those who had the pleasure to propose about a year ago that the fifth annual forum of the European Union strategy for the Baltic Sea region would be organized in Finland, in Turku. And the positive decision was then soon thereafter made. However, I myself moved on to other tasks soon after that, to the Adriatic region, but I am therefore extremely pleased to be able to attend this forum here today. So I would like to warm-heartedly thank the organizers for having extended the invitation to me. I am equally pleased that this time at the annual forum I am not just sitting passively in the audience listening to lots of presentations, but I have the possibility to have a more active function as a moderator. Of course, most participants to meetings like this end up having the passive role in the audience, but I very strongly recommend you not to be passive listeners at this plenary, but really take part in the discussion, put questions to the panelists, express your concerns and your views. So as a moderator, I do plan to make sure that there is enough time for discussion, for questions and answers. I think Emily and Pavel already mentioned that this session concentrates on the issue that currently is felt to be perhaps the most crucial, most decisive question when it comes to the possibilities for macro-regional strategies to be successful. That is the governance of the macro-regional strategies. The importance of the governance issue was recognized in the report that the European Commission published last June about the value added of macro-regional strategies. It was on that basis that the Council then discussed the issue, and in the Council conclusions of last October, the Commission was invited to facilitate the discussion on improving the governance of the macro-regional strategies and to report to the Council by the end of 2014. The Commission has done its work. The report was published about 2 weeks ago, and we here are amongst the first that have a chance to look more closely at the report on governance and express our opinions on it. I repeat myself, but once again I would like to say that, at least as far as I understand, annual forums serve the purpose of information exchange for sure, but they are also meant to be forums where all stakeholders have a chance to influence the work and bring in their own input into the strategy work. So let us not miss this chance today. The report that we are discussing here today will, in the coming months, be discussed in the Friends of the Presidency group during the Italian presidency, with a view to the Council then sometime in the autumn either giving its consent to the recommendations or at least some of the recommendations contained in the report, and perhaps coming up with some new ones. In a few minutes we shall have Commissioner Hahn highlight the main findings and recommendations of the report. But before that, I would still like to say a couple of words about how we plan to structure this plenary. After Commissioner Hahn, we would have Minister Tuomioja make his intervention, in which I hope he will also share some views on how the Finnish government looks at the report. And after that, the two panelists that are present, at least, maybe a third one will still appear, will also have a chance to express their views. And I will provide you many opportunities to ask questions, to make comments. So, and we will also have an extra bonus to this plenary. At 10:30 we will have NGO representative to come here and express the views from the NGOs that have been having their meeting in Turku at the same time on these governance issues. But let us get finally started. Mr. Commissioner, would you be so kind as to share your wisdom on how the governance of the macro-regional strategies can be improved to ensure the success of the strategies? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Timo. Minister, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everybody. I have made it to my habit to be rather frank with you when addressing you, and in particular if it's our annual meeting where we have the opportunity to reflect about what has been done over the past year and what should be done in the next year to come. So I don't mind telling you that when I became European Commissioner in 2010, I really didn't expect the macro-regional strategies to become such a major part of regional policy during my term in office. But following your example, the Danube launched a macro-regional strategy, and now we are weeks away from the publication of a new Adriatic Union strategy with the strategy for the Alpine region planned for next year. So one could say you have started a trend, and an important one. This is a tribute to your efforts, and you should be proud of the part you have played in pioneering this new way of working and cooperation. But as I said yesterday, we still need to do more to make this new approach reach its full potential. We have studied your experience and that of the Danube. Structures have been put in place, some good, some less satisfactory. There is support at the political level, but that support doesn't always translate into top-level decisions-making or follow-up to initiatives decided under the strategy. And as I have said over and over again, it doesn't often enough translate into the necessary human resources. Europe still looks at the Baltic Sea region as the pioneer in the macro-regional approach. So I'm hoping you will seize the governance report we published 2 weeks ago and really use it to give your strategy more muscle and more capacity to deliver results. Let me remind you of our key recommendations, but also remind you these are our suggestions for you to reflect on and act on in your own way. I think each strategy has to answer in a tailor-made individual manner. I think it's time for the macro regions to assume responsibility for their own strategy and performance. At present, all the strategies over-rely on the Commission as the principal driving force. The strength of the strategies needs to come from the region itself. We need full involvement of all levels of governance, including the ministerial level of your governments. And I remember quite well yesterday we had different discussions in different settings, and often there was a comment on multi-level governance. I had the feeling that on the local, on the regional level, there's much more ownership and involvement than partly on the national level. So maybe it's a reverse multi-level governance issue that we are addressing in that respect. Sometimes we have to turn things from up to down and vice versa. What we propose is a key role for the ministers hosting national contact points, leading implementation and meeting as required to take decisions and solve problems that are not possible to resolve at technical level. And we believe that sectoral ministers need to be more involved and oversee the work of the different priority areas. Meeting, if needs, should be on an ad hoc basis. I'm the last who asked for a regular meeting if there's nothing to discuss. But if something has to be discussed, there should be an opportunity to come together even on a ministerial level. You are ahead of the game on some of our proposals. For example, to put in place a rotating presidency. Finland has been the first and done a great job and will shortly be handing over to Estonia, I understand. But you need to make full use of this new system to lead decision-making, calling ad hoc meetings as required, troubleshooting when and if necessary. To succeed, you will have to address the human resources question. It will simply not be possible to get best results if staff is only available 5 to 10% of their working time on this strategic work. Too many key people working on the strategy are asked to do this as a minor part of their job. We need full-time engagement from the key people, the NCPs, and those leading priority areas and horizontal actions. I said I would be frank. We have assumed that if member states identify a topic as a priority, they will also provide the staff to participate in meetings, make recommendations, and follow up on decisions. But there are priorities and areas that are still not receiving this kind of support. So are these areas priorities for the region, or they are not priorities? It's your strategy, and you must decide. At the heart of this is ownership. The strategy achieves its potential when we work on priorities where member states have made a clear choice to cooperate together. The recent election results of the European Parliament demonstrate how much work is still to be done to make clear the connection between the everyday life of EU citizens and European policy. I believe that the macro-regional approach can help us to bring Europe closer to the regions and the people who live in them. To give you some examples, environment is an area where commitment to the macro-regional strategy is clear. The result? More and more pollution hotspots are being tackled throughout the macro-region. However, if we look at transport, which everyone accepts is key to growth in the region, progress in joint planning and realization of the TEN-T networks is slow. The value added of the strategy is the contribution it can make to planning, investment and implementation. I'm sure Pavel Telicka will have more to say on this later on. In the Danube, we have already experimented with holding a meeting of transport ministers from the macro region and plan to hold another this autumn. The reason was that we had some problems concerning navigability, and as it was also a key topic for my colleague, Vice President Kallas, being the Transport Commissioner, he used this format to bring to convene the transport ministers of the region to address this issue, and I think we could find some proper, sustainable solutions. Another area is, for example, energy. You don't need me to tell you how important it's to develop our energy security. And as the Commission's energy security strategy published last week says, a regional approach will be decisive for the integration of the European energy market and of our security of supply. The macro-regional strategies can provide a framework to identify coherent solutions, but we need more strategic political thinking and decision-making. In this region, one way forward is to increase energy production through biogas. Another is to accelerate work on interconnectors between the member states in the region and extend the infrastructure of LNG. All this must go hand in hand with efforts to step up energy efficiency. None of this will work well without a joined-up approach that looks at the region as a whole and not just at the separate countries within it. We need shared vision at the political level that feeds down to those charged with implementation, first to the national contact points and then to the relevant priority areas. The macro region is not an obligation. It was your choice. A year from now, the choices made by the member states will be clearer. If the programming of funds in the new generation of regional policy programs reflects the objectives and prioritizes the projects of the strategy, we will know we are on the right track. If not, I think my successor will want to ask some tough questions. The European Commission will continue to facilitate your work and help with the strategic choices you have to make. The Baltic Sea Region Transnational Programme will also be there to offer support, and I will take this opportunity to congratulate the Programming Committee and the Secretariat on their excellent work. Let me close by saying a macro-region strategy should represent member states' strategic choices for their region. Without national governments, regions and city authorities following up with those choices with concrete measures and investments, we will not reach the objectives we want. Our governance report really is a call on everyone of you, from individuals to cities and regions, right up to ministerial level, to play your part in moving from words to action and ensure that the Baltic continues to be a model for others as a macro region. And once again, I would like to reassure you, the Commission is at your disposal, but our understanding is to be facilitator, to assist you, not to be in the driving seat. The driving seat should be you should be in the driving seat. As member states, you should be clear about your objectives, about your choices. The Commission is ready to be there, but I think we have to make some changes, some changing that the idea of the macro region to be a bottom-up initiative is still alive and is really implemented in the way as it was designed previously at the beginning of our exercise having such kind of macro-regional strategy. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hahn, thank you very much for this concise summary of the contents of the report. By the way, how many of you have had a chance to read the report? Oh, quite many, so we do not rely only on what we just heard from Commissioner Hahn at the moment. And thank you very much also for your frankness. I think we all feel like being part of the big Baltic Sea region family here, so it's only proper, I think, to discuss matters openly, frankly, without hesitation, like within a family. Now that what the Commissioner has said is still fresh in my mind, perhaps there is a reflection immediately to what he said, maybe from one of the panelists or from the audience. We could take one question. It's microphone number 1, please. Number 2.
Okay, Slava Khatko from Russia. I have a short comment and a question to Mr. Hahn. I like very much the definition 1 BSR. It means that we have one Baltic Sea region. It's very important because we have common projects, common environment, everything is common. It's impossible to do good ecology in left part of the pool and not have a good ecology in the right part of the pool. But the problem is, from our point of view, that we have two strategies, okay? It's impossible to manage the region, okay? If we speak about macro region, unique macro region, with the two strategies, we have to have the only one. Even in your, in the document which is delivered here, in the conclusion, there is coordination. There is no one word about necessity, from our point of view, to coordinate two strategies, Northwest strategy of Russia and the European strategy. And from our point of view, it's bad news, okay? Now about good news. We have done our homework, home task. You have the books, some kind of books on your working places, how to organize the, let's say, coordination of the two strategies, okay? We have a unique organizer to, let's say, to develop it, it's CBSS, okay, which could be some kind of organization which can, from our point of view, to, let's say, to do something for coordination of this strategy. But now question, this is a good news. We know that there is a working group between you and Mr. Slunyaev, Minister of Regional Development. I'm advisor of him, okay? We had already, you had already these meetings or working groups, and there are some priorities. We appreciate very much such a kind of activity because we think that this is the first steps to organize this unique approach to the region, because it's impossible to manage the region without such a kind of unique approach. Mr. Hahn, what do you think about next step and, let's say, roadmap? How to organize these practical steps in these 5 priorities you mentioned in the working group between European Union and the Russian government? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Commissioner Hahn, would you like to comment on this?
Briefly, because more or less everything was explained. There are basically 2 strategies, and if you look into the substance, there are no big differences. Nevertheless, I think it was good to have set up this joint working group on the occasion of a bilateral meeting between the Russian government and the European Commission. At the margin, we had a meeting, as it was said, by the colleague between Minister Slunyaev and myself, and we agreed about 5 priorities. There have been, I think, rather successful meetings in between. Now it's about implementation. Of course, we have to provide the necessary financial means, but this is subject to further negotiations. Of course, I strongly believe we cannot ignore the current political situation, but nevertheless, if we think in the spirit of the European Union, of our founding fathers, cooperation is something important, and we have to establish close relationships with our neighbors. And as it was rightly said, the problems of the Baltic Sea, which inspired all of you to start these macro-regional strategies, can only be resolved if everybody is participating into it and is contributing to solve the problems. So I'm rather convinced that we will find ways and means, but both parts have to participate in an adequate manner. I don't have doubts that it is possible, but once again, we have to go step by step.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Perhaps I can also pose one question to you before we move on. One of the key questions, as I see in the governance report, has to do with the role of the Commission vis-à-vis the Member States. And until now, Commission has been playing a very central role in reality in the implementation of the strategy. Now, Commission is saying that Commission would prefer to be the coach rather than the manager, or you said just in your presentation that you wouldn't like to be sitting in the driving seat anymore. So could you perhaps a bit more concretely explain what this would mean in practice and where you would be sitting in the back seat or in the trunk, or which in your new vision of how the strategy is implemented, what the role of Commission could be.
If you like, close to the driver. But
Good.
no, not to be misunderstood. I think it's about simply that I think the concept of the macro-regional strategy was to be seen as a bottom-up initiative. It was launched by the member states. In the particular case of the Baltic Sea strategy, many of the members of the European parliaments have been involved. Some became, in the meantime, heads of states. So there's a strong involvement, or there was a strong involvement. And originally, it was simply that the Commission should draft a strategy, and when it is once adopted, in theory, the job of the Commission would have been done. But in practice, still, we are on board. I think it's good. Yesterday, we had the opportunity to discuss with the national contact points, the priority area coordinators, and the horizontal action coordinators, how things have evolved over the years. And for instance, there was a clear request that also other DGs of the European Commission should be more involved in the work and should use the platform to implement their policy and to present their policy and to coordinate where necessary their areas. So it's an opportunity also for other parts of the Commission, and that's why I think the whole strategy has evolved in a certain dimension, which is quite a good one, at least from my point of view. But once again, we are now, if you take the Baltic Sea strategy, at the moment where we celebrate, if you like, 5 years. And after 5 years, one could think what has been done well, but where we need some further developments. And even if it's 5 years, 10 years, or whatsoever, there will always be a situation that one would believe, okay, we need some new political decisions reflecting more recent developments. And for that, we don't have a structure so far. And that's why we have proposed these governance ideas. Once again, it's something which has been initiated by member states, and the idea was that member states should play the decisive, the most important role. It's about subsidiarity, and as it is about subsidiarity, I believe and I'm convinced member states should decide about their own future. It's also about the capacity of our member states to run their own business and not always to rely on the Commission. There has been so many critics also around the European elections, and I think it's necessary to sort out what can really be done on a national, a regional level, but where do we need European coordination. Where we need European coordination, we are at your disposal, but I think many things can be done indeed on the membership level, and in particular the decision, what are the priorities, what are the real problems, how to be addressed, what are the decisions, that should be done on the level of member states and following our concept of multi-level governance, including the local and regional authorities.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Another way that you put it in your intervention, you said that the strategy is not an obligation, it is a choice. I would perhaps go even as far as saying it is an opportunity. But thank you for your comments, for your intervention. Let me hand over now to Minister Tuomioja. Perhaps he will tell us if Finland sees macro-regional strategy as an obligation, as a choice, as an opportunity, or something else. Please, the floor is yours, Mr. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. I think the obvious answer we see all of this. But I would like to first thank for the invitation to address this annual forum, and especially extend our thanks and appreciation to the Commission, the City of Turku, and the Baltic Development Forum. All of our meetings are organized in a spirit of cooperation and coherence. As you are aware, we were planning also to have a Prime Minister's meeting here in Turku, but due to events elsewhere in Europe, this has not been possible. But I would also like to underline that even if we are facing in Europe a serious challenge to the post-Cold War order, and we have to deal with that, this is something which should not be allowed to affect the good cooperation that we have in these various regional fora around the Baltic Sea and the northern dimension included. Because the welfare of the Baltic Sea region is one of the key priorities for us in Finland. And we want all of this cooperation to continue at expert and authority level and in different fora. And indeed, this has been the case in the expert and working groups and networks where work has continued. After a few weeks, Estonia will take over the presidency of the CBSS. We are committed to closely cooperation with the incoming presidency, as well as with all countries around the sea. And we are ready to give our contribution and continue the important work for the benefit of the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea region is a dynamic economic area. The region represents a huge potential also for future growth. The Baltic Sea states are strongly interdependent, and the sea itself plays a crucial role for all of us. Regional cooperation around the sea has helped to boost trade and growth and increase well-being, but we are still far from using to the full extent this potential which is available. There are many cooperation mechanisms and frameworks in our region. The Council of Baltic Sea States has played a significant role in the dynamic development of regional cooperation. The CBSS is the most important intergovernmental organization in the region for political high-level discussions. Its role is also increasing as a project organization, including the implementation of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. And one of the strengths of this cooperation is the active involvement of cities and regions of the member states. The Northern Dimension provides a useful framework for policy dialogue concerning regional cooperation between EU, Russia, Norway and Iceland. And it covers not only the Baltic Sea, but also the Barents region. The need to improve communication and connection between the different cooperation structures and stakeholders is particularly mentioned as one of our important goals for our CBSS presidency. Likewise, we have highlighted the need to improve the implementation of the priorities, strategies, and results of the various projects. The EUSBSR was the first macro-regional strategy for the European Union when it was adopted almost 5 years ago. And as Commissioner Hahn said, we have started a trend. The Baltic Sea region strategy has been a sort of test bed for the macro-regional approach in the EU. It has created multiple new networks, brought new ideas, and achieved many concrete results in its priority areas. And I want to thank all the stakeholders for their contributions to this. But it is clear that we now have come to the point where the functionality, results and value added of the strategy must be critically examined and its shortcomings corrected. In order to give our strategy more muscle and capacity to deliver results, as you indicated. The Commission's report on the governance of macro-regional strategies from May 21st is something where I can fully agree with the analysis that the report presents on stronger political leadership and decision-making from countries and regions, which is identified as a need. And for authorities working on day-to-day implementation, there is also a need for explicit lines of responsibility, effective coordination, and sufficient resources. And obviously, above all, we have to fulfill what we promise. The gap between political declarations and the concrete implementation level has to be overcome. It is true that strategic leadership and coordination has so far mainly rested on the shoulders of the Commission. And the Commission's role will continue to be crucial in the future as well. After all, we are speaking of an EU strategy and not only a joint effort on a regional level. Your contribution and the hard work in the DG Regio in coordinating and facilitating the macro-regional strategies is highly appreciated, and in bringing the macro-regional approach and the EU policies closer together, an active participation from all directorates general of the Commission is also needed in the future. Your report on governance mentions that the governance of the macro-regional strategies is one size cannot fit all, and that the different strengths of the macro regions have to be understood and taken into account. And I couldn't agree more, and this particularly applies to the Baltic Sea region as well. I agree that the ministers hosting national contact points should play a leading role. But still, the proposal for regular meetings between us and even a rotating presidency for the strategy may be rather challenging, given the number of ministerial meetings we already have in various formats each year with colleagues from the Baltic Sea region. It seems unlikely that my colleagues would be eager to add one more rotating presidency and one more regular meeting to their schedules. But whenever there is a need for strategic decisions on this strategy to be taken on the ministerial level, I am sure that we can find flexible solutions that make use of existing regional structures, such as the CBSS or the Northern Dimension. The newly assumed rotating chair of the national contact points can bring more consistency and continuity to coordination work, and this should be further developed. I think we can all agree that the role of sectoral ministries is crucial, and that they should drive progress in their thematic areas much more than what has been the case so far, apart from ministers for the environment who regularly meet at HELCOM format. And we are going to discuss the roles of the various ministries in the implementation of the EUSBSR in our government in the near future, and I encourage and expect other governments to do likewise. For discussing and agreeing on important regional issues related to the strategy, they could also meet in the margins of the Council. As to the implementation level, we have to bear in mind that most of our national administrations are struggling with scarce resources, and we should ensure necessary working conditions and support for the priority area coordinators and horizontal action leaders, but we should not build a system that increases the administrative burden too much. And looking at the present structure of the Baltic Sea strategy and its action plan, one cannot avoid questioning, are we trying to cover too many fields? I agree that there is a need for streamlining and focusing on areas and issues that really bring added value from a regional perspective. And in this respect, I welcome the aim of the NCPs and the Commission to address this during the next months and review the action plan where needed. Focusing the cooperation on objectives and projects that can bring tangible results is even more important when we now have fresh resources available in the European structural and investment funds and other EU programs for funding good projects. When the EU strategy was initiated, saving the sea was seen as the most urgent challenge. And in response to the urgency of the ecological challenge, we can note with satisfaction that work on environmental projects have succeeded relatively well. Environmental concerns and the health of the Baltic Sea must and will remain central on our agenda. At the same time, I share your view that there is a need for much more regional cooperation and strategic initiatives in the fields of transport and energy. You mentioned accelerating work on interconnectors between member states and infrastructure for LNG. These issues are vital for Finland, and they have been among our priorities during our presidency, and the results were presented here yesterday. There is also a plan to hold a meeting between the NB8 foreign ministers on enhanced energy cooperation, which could also contribute to the work within the EU strategy. Cooperation with all countries of the region is a must. When and if we want to save the sea, connect the region, and create prosperity. In times of international stress in state relations, the importance of regional stability, dialogue, and cooperation remains. I am glad that so many experts and regional representatives from non-EU countries of the Baltic Sea region are also giving their contribution to this forum, and that so many joint projects have been and are being implemented. And I also wish that the constructively started dialogue between the EU and Russia on defining the links between the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region and the strategy for Northwest Russia of the Russian Federation will continue and create a solid basis for future cooperation. From the very beginning, one of the strengths of the EU strategy has been the involvement of multi-level stakeholders. It is not only a cooperation strategy for the governments, but also for regions, cities, businesses, universities, and educational institutions, and NGOs. And we should broaden this involvement even more. And this annual forum is a good example of the multi-level approach and the contribution of various actors. And we should also enhance the role of the many well-functioning pan-Baltic organizations in the implementation of this strategy. Last November, the Baltic Sea Labour Forum Roundtable was held in Helsinki. And there I underlined that it is important to promote also issues related to youth and mobility of labour. The two focus areas, youth unemployment and mobility of labour, are of utmost importance and crucial for the economic and social development of the Baltic Sea region. If we take a broader look at the future of the region and the EU from a social perspective, it is clear that the internal market of the EU and the mobility of labour enhance opportunities for economic growth in the future. And in order to have a well-functioning welfare society that would be at the same time solid and flexible, economic growth is a necessity, not least because of the challenge posed by the demographic change. And finally, I would also like to draw your attention to the importance of supporting widening youth cooperation in the region. And this has been one of the goals of our CBSS presidency, and it was also discussed in the Baltic Sea region NGO forum held here in the beginning of the week. When we want to integrate the region, use all its potential and create sustainable prosperity, increasing mobility and connections between our young people is the best tool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Tuomioja, for your intervention. I think it gives us a very good basis for the discussion on the governance issue, as you, in your presentation, already expressed Finnish views on the major conclusions or recommendations of the Commission report. I wonder if Mr. Commissioner would like to reflect immediately on some of the views expressed by Minister Tuomioja.
I can fully agree, and once again, I would like to stress what the Minister also said. It's not about creating something or reinventing the wheel. I think the Baltic, that's why in our report we have stressed the fact that the different macro-regional strategies have to identify their individual solution, how to run the business, if you like. And the Baltic, different, for instance, from the Danube, can already rely on an existent structure of regional cooperation settings, if you like, and so it's not necessary to have, for instance, another ministerial formation, but simply if there's a necessity, and I think we should not overdo it and be flexible enough. The example I have mentioned concerning the transport ministers for the Danube, this meeting took place at the margin of informal or of a ministerial conference of the transport minister of the European Union. So they were sitting together for 1 hour in a special room, if you like. So it's not something where you have organized something extra, but it's where we need political decisions. And I believe concerning our macro-regional strategy for the Baltic Sea, we need more political decisions in the future, and in that case we need an opportunity that the political authorities come together. But I think there are rather mature, so to say, very mature administrations. There's a lot of experience, and I think there is no problem to find proper solution. Once again, I think it's necessary to identify your tailor-made structure to come to political decisions, and I think as it has been now done in the Baltic Sea with a rotating presidency and with these first steps, we are on the right path, and once again I have no doubts that we can achieve our goals, but we need something after 5 years indicating how we can make new political choices, decisions wherever needed.
Thank you very much. I understand Commissioner and Minister cannot stay with us until 11 o'clock, so perhaps if there was a question to Minister Tuomioja on the basis of his presentation, I would allow 1 or 2 questions from the audience. It's the chance for all stakeholders now to express a view. Please, I see the gentleman there, and I think it's microphone 2. Ibis from Latvia, right?
Thank you, Timo. Distinguished presenters and panelists, I would like to pick up on a few points that were mentioned and the intervention previously from the audience. We talk about the cooperation in the region, which is absolutely essential, and we have to look at the big partners in the region. And we have the Northwest Russia strategy, where we have a cooperation already defining 5 cooperation areas. But we haven't really seen what is the response and what is the view on those 5 cooperation areas from our Russian partners. So if there's any response on that, it would be very helpful. The other option we would like to clarify is the language of the strategy, which is also currently in the Russian. So I'm wondering how many of us have really looked in depth into that strategy. And the final question about the cooperation component of that strategy, because the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region is all about cooperation. It's drafted in the cooperation spirit. So if we have specific areas of cooperation in the Northwest District, the Russia strategy, I would be happy to hear about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw another one from the audience wishing to take the floor. Jussi Ylilahti, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm working in the Finnish Perm Rep in Brussels. I think this governance report is a very good basis for discussions in the Council during the Italian presidency next autumn. I have a question concerning the financing of macro-regional strategies. The governance report again repeats the, I would say, boring principle of no new funds. That means that all concrete action in the BSR strategy have to be financed by other existing financing instruments, either EU or national. But now the situation has changed. We have included objective and possibility for joint financing of this concrete action by the resources of mainstream programs. This was included in the Common Strategic Framework, and it's included in the legislation, Article 140, saying that 15% of ERDF resources can be used outside of the program area. So in concrete terms, this would mean joint projects located in Turku, known as the maritime capital city of Finland. A joint project financed by the resources of Finnish cohesion policy program, by the Swedish program, by the Baltic states programs, by Poland, by Germany. This is a big a new possibility because in the Baltic Sea region area the cohesion policy funding is over 100 billion euros for this period. So the Commission has now been scrutinizing the partnership agreements of the member states in this area. My question to Commissioner is that do you think that in this area the member states are ready to take this next step using mainstream programs to support and finance joint action in the Baltic Sea region strategy? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for these two questions. One, I think, was more having to do with the Northwest Federal District of Russia strategy, and the other one with the alignment of funding, which I do think also being a very central part of the governance, how to make the strategies succeed. Would Commissioner or Minister like to reflect on these questions? Please, Mr.
Maybe
Commissioner.
concerning the first question, but this is more to the Foreign Minister, I believe. But nevertheless, I think once again we have this joint working group between Russia and the European Union to identify the common grounds in terms of, if you like, the two Baltic strategies. And having looked into it, I think there are no big discrepancies. Quite the opposite. There are a lot of common interests, and I think the next step is, of course, and this leads me to the answer concerning the second question, not only to agree about topics and issues, but also to find ways and means to deliver, to implement, and to provide necessary financial resources. It's correct that in the new that we have always stressed that the new financial perspective should be used now to implement in a wider sense what has been discussed and agreed. And of course, the main source, the main financial source of this implementation opportunity are the individual regional and national operational programs of our member states. That's why we have always emphasized it's important that in the programming already there is, as far as possible, a ring fencing of money related to projects being part of the Baltic Sea strategy. And as I said yesterday, in different occasions, I have the feeling that in most of the member states, this homework is properly done. But we will have analyzed by the end of the year or beginning of next year how far this has been really transferred into concrete financial allocation. But I would like to correct this 15% which was mentioned is within a member state, but not within a whole region. So this kind of flexibility is within a member state and is more or less inspired that in some member states we have different categories of regions. We have, in particular in the newer member states, a situation that the capital region is a booming one, whereas the other parts of the country are still lagging behind. One could say that the economic gap has widened over the years between the capital region and the remaining part of the country, and therefore we had to see how we can found a cohesion within the individual member states, and for that purposes and for some others we have introduced this 15%, but it's nothing if you have the idea that some other member states shift money to other member states. Of course, there is a very limited opportunity, but far less than 50%.
Thank you, Commissioner. Minister Tuomioja, do you have a reaction?
Well, regarding the first question, I understood it was more directed at some Russian participant to give us more information about the Northwestern strategy.
Thank you. As the former national contact point of Finland, I cannot help making here a comment about to this issue that we were just talking about, the alignment of funding. I think in many of the countries in the Baltic Sea region, I actually think in all but Sweden, the national contact point is hosted by the Foreign Ministry. Whereas then when it comes to the administering of the structural funds, it is done in another ministry. And I think this is a big challenge on the day-to-day level business. As I locate now in the Adriatic region, I understand that in the Danube region or in the new Adriatic strategy, there also exists this model of dual NCP. So the NCP being shared by the Foreign Ministry and then by the ministry in charge of the structural funds. Are you aware of such models, and could that be a model to be recommended to others as well?
Once again, there are different models, and usually in most of the member states or in the participating states, the Foreign Ministry is in the lead to coordinate, but it's then up to the internal administrative structure how things are coordinated. That's why I'm always emphasizing that such a strategy is an horizontal issue, and one has to find ways and means to coordinate country internal, and we have some good examples where these national contact points chair a meeting of responsible peoples nominated from the different ministries contributing to the strategy, and this has evolved to be quite a good structure to run the business and to coordinate to other member states. But we need country internal coordination, and it's true that the financial allocation is mostly with another ministry than the Foreign Ministry. But once again, there are many examples that it works quite well. Sometimes I have to admit The foreign minister is a little bit decoupled from the other line ministries, but it depends really on the individuals in most of the cases and less on the bureaucratic structure. It's more about the ownership being given and provided by individuals.
Thank you. Minister Tuomioja, is the Finnish foreign ministry decoupled from the other ministries?
I hope not, I cannot say.
Okay, thank you for these comments. I think we need to move on and let the other two panelists also express their views on the governance issue. So I would now hand over the floor to Mr. Pavel Telicka, please.
Commissioner, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to appreciate having been invited to Turku to this event. I have a much easier task. We've heard two keynote speeches of the Commissioner and the Minister. I will just make several remarks, providing you with a certain angle that I think is a legitimate part of the whole strategy.
Sorry to interrupt you, but if I understand right, Commissioner and Minister have to leave us here, so let us just thank them warmly for their contribution, and we will continue the discussion here.
No problem.
Please.
Fine. Let me maybe start by saying that coming here to Turku, I studied quite carefully the conclusions of the report on governance on the macro regions, and I think the conclusions are very clear. The report states that there is a need for political leadership, clearer responsibilities, a role for the European Commission to be engaged and involved in coordination on the European Union level, but also the question of linkage of the political and administrative level to be organized possibly by a special representative. And then finally, but not least, better focus of the funds. These are at least some of the conclusions which I find very relevant. Now, I would argue that the new policy concept of TEN-T with the creation of the core and comprehensive network and the multimodal and interoperable corridors with a European coordinator designed to each single corridor to organize work is in fact very much heading in the direction and reaching the objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that it is fair to say that we need to create, or rather we need to meet the opportunity and the challenge at the same time of constructing, upgrading, modernizing our transport infrastructure. The fact is that we are facing today probably the heritage of late decisions on the political European level years ago. We are lacking interconnectivity in many respects, and I think it goes without saying that we can maximize the effort of the internal market if the transport infrastructure is sufficient. So we really need to rebuild the infrastructure, and the policy concept that I've mentioned is, in my opinion, the adequate instrument. In the last 9 years, I've been working as European coordinator for Rail Baltica, which is basically a line, a corridor, which is reaching a higher speed at 1435 gauge, basically linking Tallinn with Warsaw via Riga, Kaunas, and in reality also linking irrespective of the sea in between Helsinki. This is a project which integrates in transport terms the Baltic countries with the rest of the internal market. I think that we don't need to go far in realizing the fact that instability, insecurity on the eastern border of the European Union just emphasizes the need for having options. And this is exactly what we need. At a time when the instability is affecting the economy and is affecting our businesses with the North Sea Baltic corridor, which will integrate Rail Baltica into 3,000 kilometers long corridor heading all the way from Helsinki, Tallinn, via Warsaw and Berlin to Amsterdam and Antwerp, is in fact providing this opportunity, this option. For the first time, on the eastern part of that corridor, we will have a north-south axis, which becomes, in fact, a strategic matrix in the whole infrastructure concept. I'm a Czech national. I come from the Czech Republic, and I would like hereby to emphasize that this is not something that is of interest just to the Baltics, Finland, and let's say Poland, but the Czech Republic, jointly with Slovakia, is per capita the biggest producer of cars in Europe currently. The numbers are volatile, but let's say that the production just in the Czech Republic is now well over 1 million, and the figure in Slovakia is not lagging far behind. This corridor creates an opportunity and an alternative in terms of transporting the cars and components from Central Europe to the east, using this, as I've said, the eastern part of the corridor, the north-south axis. But this is not a one-way channel. In fact, with the new legislation, with the new SO2 directive from 2015, we will see a significant implication on short sea shipping, and I think that goods like timber, paper, pulp from Finland and Latvia will, of course, become, strategically interested in this new project. Now, talking about this part of Europe, we are obviously talking about an extremely strategic point, and that is the port infrastructure. For the first time with this project, we will have connected by one line all the relevant ports of the Baltic region. This is for the first time we will have them on a 1435 gauge, which obviously is here not to replace or to substitute the dominant east-west flows, but creates an additional value, creates complementarity, but especially creates for the first time a corridor that will be linking these ports with the rest of Europe and not just the Central Europe that I have mentioned. So it is creating opportunities. It is something that we have not had before. Today, we are ending the preparatory phase for the next, let's say, dimension of the project, and that is the higher speed line, the European gauge. Now, I think that we don't have to emphasize the implications that this will have on the development of the macro region of North Sea and North Sea Baltic macro region, but also the southern part of the axis that I have mentioned. I think that it is fair to say that in fact areas like regional development, environment, transport. These are areas where we cannot stay dependent on national policies, national strategies, national planning. The bottlenecks become very clear, and I think that coming back to the report, clearly we are seeing at least 3 sectors which are, as I say, not only dependent, but which can be the carrier of the macro region development. After all, for the goodwill Europeans, I think that the interest of a further integration of the market, creating new opportunities, creating new alternatives is by all means a part of the macro region development, as well as the new concept of TEN-T guidelines. Now let me finish by saying that if we utilize these policy instruments, if we are able to put in practice the objectives which also identify the bottlenecks of the macro region development. We now have policy instruments and financial means, the Connecting Europe facility basically providing nearly 24 billion euros that can be invested. This is an opportunity which cannot be missed. This is an opportunity which, as I've said, creates alternatives, provides for options, but also are instruments which are absolutely necessary to the development of the region. So I'll stop here, ladies and gentlemen, because I understand my role is really more a complementary one and one of a panelist to eventually address questions of your interest. But I had the intention to show in practice that what the report identifies as objectives is already a matter of fact, a matter of life in some of the EU policies. I have taken part in the recent European elections. In fact, this will probably be one of my last public appearances as European coordinator, as I'll be returning to European politics. And I have acknowledged the very harsh criticism that we have experienced in the election campaign. I need to say that a part of this criticism is justified. But I also need to say that, as I've underlined the word goodwill Europeans, we should look into these opportunities and we should have the vision, the political courage, the ability to coordinate and cooperate to put this in practice and hopefully restart the engine which was driving us in the early years of European integration, and which is sort of becoming in recent years a little bit, I would say, less dynamic. So I'll stop here and I'll be happy to take any questions if there are later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Telicka. It was very nice of you to draw attention to the importance of the macro-regional dimension and look at the governance issue as they are seen in particular from the transport sector point of view. Did I understand right that you are going to start in the European Parliament?
Yes,
as a member?
My mother, who died a couple of years ago, would say I got a bit crazy and nostalgic for my old times in European politics, so I led the list of the party that narrowly but still won the European elections in the Czech Republic.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So it's very good that all the views and ideas expressed here will be taken over to the European Parliament through you. We appreciate that. Is there any immediate reaction, comment, question to Mr. Telicka?
That's a hand.
It's difficult to, I see someone there in the middle. So it's again microphone 2.
Thank you very much. My name is Filip Hamrodotsa. I'm coming from, background is Finnish employer, so I'm also a member of the European Economic and Social Committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Telicka, for your very clear intervention as regards drawing attention to this transport importance. This shows concretely how important it is to have in the strategy until 2020 transport as a priority. And again, now the question is about the implementation. You explained to us that there are very good already plans, outlines, and even also implementation. I have a first comment as regards implementation. It has to do also with the previous discussion. That is the question about involvement of different actors in the society. I think that in our region, here in the Baltic Sea region, we do not need, as it was said, new how to say, meetings and organizations. There exist numerous of these networks, chambers, consumers, environments, all. They are existing and good, and they should be taken into account and be benefited, involved, and engaged in the also transport things, for sure. My question is about how far do the transport system reach, seen from the European Union perspective. With this I mean that we are very far in the north, and really up in the north there is coming a sea against us. That is the Arctic Sea. And we know that there is enormous potential in the Arctic Sea, and challenges also. However, the question to you is, how do you see that European Union strategy could, how to say, reach up much better with the Connecting Europe and TNT up to the northern forest? Let's talk about the big ports, which will have enormous importance in the future, in Norway, Narvik, in Russia, Murmansk, and some others, where there will be a lot of much more traffic, and also transport of goods and other things. And the same goes with the Barents Sea, with the enormous potential of minerals and energy and so on, which is needed in the markets of the European Union down in the south. Do you think yourself that the infrastructure, logistics, and transport is enough, or should there be much more done? My question is that, my point myself is, it should be done much more to connect that part to the markets of the European Union. This was my question to you. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may just a side comment on the first point, let's say on the institutional point that you have made with reference to the previous speakers. I do admit, and my apology for being blunt, but I spent the last 9-10 years in business, and I must say that I found the questions or the points that were raised in terms of the institutional aspects to some extent redundant. Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that we have the institutional structures in place, both European-wise as well as nationally. I think that it's a question of, if we speak about a member state, of coordination in the government itself. We don't need to discuss it. Maybe on the European level, we don't need to see a model which in Finland would copy the one in Estonia, and the one in Germany or elsewhere. I think that this is, in my opinion, really redundant to discuss. We have the institutional structures. The question is, do we have sufficient political will? If we have sufficient political will, fine. Can we have the same vision and the same objectives? If we have it, do we have the creativity in terms of setting the right strategy? If we have that, then we really need the force, the engine to implement it. So my apology for that side comment, but I think that looking or listening to your remark, I think that we are on the same line there. In terms of what is really needed, I think I was the one among several colleagues in the past when we were debating the TEN-T concept with Vice President Kallas, and I would like to pay a tribute to him and the Commission services in this respect, because the transport policy proves that Europe is able to act. I mean, what we now have in place is a strategic-minded concept which probably sort of accelerates some of the work which should have been carried already some time ago. And I'm coming to your point, in fact. I think that on one hand, we need every single element that will contribute to integration on the market, that will contribute to integrating also the Baltics and Finland more with the rest of the European Union. We need more logistic centers. I mean, we tend to speak about transport, but we don't speak that much about logistic centers. And I think that this goes hand in hand. The ports by themselves are, to some extent, logistic centers, but we will need to integrate those along the line. And believe me, the moment we will be able to do that, we will really have, we will inject even more into the dynamics of the regional development. But I think it would be wrong to stop there. Obviously, we now have a 10T concept which will be there and which needs to be implemented. And the financial means that we have available are significant. They are definitely higher than ever before, but they are still insufficient in able to implement it. So it's fair to say that I don't see a reason and a need and a possibility to review the current concept in the next few years, but I think we should have the vision and we should have the ability to think strategically and see, okay, where do we go from here on? So that we do not repeat the mistakes we have made maybe 15, 20 years ago. You have referred to, let's say, the Arctic part of Finland. By the way, if you look at the 10T network, I think we have, if I'm not mistaken, rather three corridors which are reaching out to the Nordic countries. But I think that you have also mentioned, let's say, the east-west dimension. You have mentioned the Russian ports, and obviously you probably had also in mind the east-west flows. And I very much agree in that. I mean, it has been mentioned today that the two strategies should be somehow debated, and we should make the best out of it. Somehow I feel that at least some of us in the process and some of us in the past 10, 15, 20 or even more years were looking at it from a bit too narrow a point of view. I think that we are looking at it more as competitors than as partners in a lot of businesses in the future. So I would also like to see how shall we make profit of the fact that the Russians are building and increasing the capacity of their ports. And I think that also the Russians should understand that the north-south axis, which Rail Baltica so far, and in the future the North Sea and Baltic corridor represents, is an opportunity. I mean, I have mentioned the Czech-built or Slovak-built cars. I've mentioned timber, paper, pulp from Finland or Latvia, but I can mention also the Russian products and also the Russian markets. So I think that we should not neglect this, and I think we should be looking in the bilateral dialogue how we can optimize and how we can also, let's say, draw conclusions on the potential which exists. So for me, the question is interconnectivity. But we'll have to go step by step. I would have a number of dreams. I would have a number of strategies. But I think that we need to be realistic. What can we put in place in terms of financing in the very near future? So I would like to see implemented what is there to be implemented. I think I would like to see the financial means utilized as they stand today. 24 billion euros is not sufficient, but I believe that some of the countries with some of the projects may have difficulties in utilizing the financial means. And I'm glad that the Vice President Kallas introduced the concept that no project, no money. So in 2017, we might see that some of those that are not prepared will be losing financial means in favor of those that will be prepared for implementation.
Thank you, Mr. Telicka. Talking about strategies, I think it is the right time to hand over to Ms. Zakrzewska from Poland. She comes from the Department for Coordination of Development Strategies and Policies, so I'm sure we will be hearing more views on strategies, but in particular, I hope on the governance issues of the macro-regional strategies. Please, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank you for this opportunity to speak here on the occasion of the BDF Forum and the Forum for EU Strategy for the Baltic Sea region, especially in this plenary session on governance issues and the role of cohesion policy in the implementation of the Baltic Sea strategy. We all see that macro-regional model is gaining ground across all Europe. As Mr. Commissioner previously mentioned, we are the pioneers of the first macro-regional strategy, and thus we are being observed by others. Our success or failure will definitely influence the macro-regional thinking of in the European Union. We see the potential in the macro-regional cooperation, especially in attracting various institutions, including regional authorities, to implement European policies locally. However, we see the macro-regional model as a complementary to the European level and national level discussions. We cannot expect, and we do not want to see macro-regions concept replace the European cooperation and regional policy implemented from national perspective. Macro-regional approach is one of the dimensions of the territorial approach. We welcome efforts aimed at improving the governance structure of the macro-regional strategies. At the same time, we want to underline that our ultimate goal is enhancing the cooperation in the Baltic Sea region and not creating new structures or new institutions. We believe that the existing institutional framework functioning in the Baltic Sea region is sufficient. However, we should try to better tailor it to the current needs. One of the possibilities here is further striving towards better cooperation and coordination between different existing Baltic Sea regional structures. Poland is ready to contribute to our Baltic efforts in this regard, and we volunteered to play the role of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region national contact point chair in the second half of 2015 during our CBSS presidency. We have to remember that a perfect macro-regional model is not the goal per se. It probably doesn't even exist. Our main goal in macro-regional approach is to stimulate multi-level cooperation, aiming at using the full potential, the full regional potential, while ensuring strong EU context and coherence of efforts with European initiatives. To this end, we need to ensure EU integrity of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, which requires continuous and strong links with the European institution. To improve the macro-regional cooperation, we see the need for a double-track approach. Strong commitment on national and regional levels in the interested countries, as well as keeping the leading coordinating role of the European level. We would like to stress that without the commitment of the European Commission, including different DGs, the European strategy for the Baltic Sea region will lack the direct link with the European policies. Although the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region has been already functioning for 5 years, it's only now with the new legislative package for the European structural and investment funds that it gained the real institutional and financial implementing tools in the form of cohesion policy, operational programs and funds topped up by other EU financial instruments. On behalf of the Polish Ministry of Infrastructure and Development, being since last November a new administrative entity responsible for coordinating of the partnership agreement, managing the operational programs, as well as coordinating the country transport policy, I'm very happy to announce that in May the Commission accepted the Polish partnership agreement. The partnership agreement is the main strategic document laying down the grounds for implementation of the European structural and investment funds in Poland. The EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region was one of the main strategic factors, together with the EU 2020 strategy and other domestic socio-economic strategic framework, to be taken into consideration while drafting the partnership agreement and operational programs. We have tried to take a proactive position in this exercise. We try to look at the strategy not as an external condition, but rather as an intrinsic fundamental element of the whole strategic programming process in the country. In the new financial perspective, which opens up a lot of opportunities, both in terms of available funding as well as perspective for cooperation, the EU strategy for Baltic Sea region has been taken into account seriously, not in terms of sometimes artificial earmarking of investment or funds as contributive to the Baltic Sea strategy, but we tried to approach the strategy proactively. This approach defines in advance what and how can be achieved in terms of Baltic Sea strategy objectives with the support of European structural and investment funds. In our programming exercise, we decided to focus on concrete implementing mechanisms, which would enable the real implementation of the strategy and thus reaching its targets. After several years of experiences of implementing the structural funds and these 5 years of implementing the EU strategy, we see that it is not enough just to label some investments as Baltic strategy contributive. As such, we can consider most of environmental or business support projects in Poland. But it is essential really to pave the way for the Baltic Sea strategy projects, including flagship projects based on cooperation of different stakeholders, to have a real access to the European structural and investment resources. The Polish Partnership Agreement, in general, the Partnership Agreement provides for the possibility for operational programs to include specific arrangements for the projects linked to EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. Among such measures, we can mention here some dedicated measures for the Baltic Sea strategy with dedicated financial allocations. Also specific calls for proposals dedicated to Baltic-oriented projects. We also envisage some preferences in the selection procedures for projects, as well as the possibility to conduct different projects with international partners from the Baltic Sea region on the basis of Article 70 of the Common Provision Regulation for the European funds. As I said, the partnership agreement provides kind of general framework for the implementation of the Baltic Sea strategy. However, the areas particularly important for Poland in terms of Baltic cooperation, which in our mind have the biggest potential to be tackled under operational programs, include research and development, environmental and culture, and these 3 mentioned mainly due to the role of the priority area coordinators, which is fulfilled by Poland in these 3 priority areas. But a lot of potential also lies within other areas, such as climate change adaptation, transport and energy connections. However, I would like to underline that it is left for the managing authorities of relevant programs to make reference to specific mechanisms according to the specificity of the program. The operational programs, as soon as they are adopted by the Commission, shall be then followed by more informal, descriptive, complementary documents. And these complementary documents shall explain details how the scope of priority axis within programs will look like, and what will be the space, the room for possible implementation of the projects linked with the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. A great potential for Baltic Sea strategy also lies within transport sector, as we heard, where a specific system of coordination has been established based on European coordinators for the TEN-T corridors and similar system for the rail freight corridors. Some of them are also defined in the context of the Baltic Sea basin. This kind of cooperation, we agree that it might be a kind of inspiration for the Baltic Sea strategy governance structures in order to give the strategy the real impact and ownership. And let me now finish by saying that to enable smooth implementation of the Baltic Sea strategy objective and reaching its targets, which are set up in the action plan, it's not necessary. It is necessary to develop the right governance structure, but also we have to find the right tools. And let's hope that the European structural and investment funds with specific practical implementation mechanisms will prove to be the right way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zakrzewska. You have reminded us in your presentation of some of the main features and characteristics and purposes of the macro-regional strategies, and highlighted the funding issues and relation to other strategies and the importance to also include the regional organizations in the work. I think we had better take the last speaker to the podium now, and then if there is still patience in the audience, we can continue the discussion after that. But we will have Mr. Jens William Grav to come to the podium and take immediately the floor. He has been participating in the NGO platform of the Baltic Sea region that has taken place here, or the NGO forum of the Baltic Sea region has taken place here in Turku earlier this week, and I believe we are going to hear the views of the NGOs on the governance issues and on macro-regional strategies in general. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, I will begin by thanking the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the city of Turku of their financial and other support by arranging this Baltic Sea NGO forum. And the Baltic Sea NGO forum is arranged by the network, and the network consists of all NGOs from all countries that are member of the CBSS. So it also includes Iceland, Norway, and Russia. I'm honored to inform you about the results of our discussion at the forum. The 12th Baltic Sea NGO Forum took place on the 2nd and 3rd of June 2014. It was organized for the second time in Turku within the framework of the Finnish Presidency of the Council of the Baltic Sea States. 220 participants from CBSS countries attended the event. The forum offered a unique opportunity for a wider cross-sectoral dialogue as it brought together representatives of non-governmental organizations, politicians, decision-makers, and academia to improve cooperation in the Baltic Sea region by raising the voice of NGO community on cooperation on the people-to-people level in the region, and by putting every common effort into collaboration on issues of vital importance. The main topic of the NGO forum in Finland was NGO creating an active and innovative civil society. Forum participants discussed the importance of inclusion and extension of the possibilities for NGOs to influence and participate in decision-making in the countries around the Baltic Sea. NGOs are effective actors in the development and strengthening modern societies, and their participation in the decision-making process aim at building up a strengthening democratic process in the Baltic Sea region. Making is true highly important. The forum's agenda included working sessions on the following themes: saving the Baltic Sea, diverse society, young immigrants' experience as to obstacle in relation to inclusion, bringing out the voice of youth, people as makers of democracy in the Baltic Sea region, people with special needs, and a roundtable on youth cooperation in the Baltic Sea region. During the forum, a networking village and several discussion groups during open session were also organized. Plenary meetings during the forum focused on NGO creating an active and innovating civil society, EU-Russian regional cooperation, founding Baltic Sea NGO cooperation, and EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, and horizontal action involved, one of the parts of the Baltic Sea strategy. Open discussion on the challenges for the development of a civil society in the countries of the Baltic Sea region resulted in following joint outcome proposal and recommendations. The Baltic Sea NGO network urged that politicians and government in the Baltic Sea countries give a much higher priority to cooperation in the region on all levels, including people to people. The Baltic Sea region should be a region of peaceful cooperation. The relations between Russia and its western neighbors should not, under the current situation in Ukraine, hamper the relation between civil society organizations in our region. People-to-people relation could become a means for finding democratic and legal solution to many issues in the region, as they form an area for open debate to prevent conflict. Despite any tension at the political level, we are citizens of neighboring countries and strive to maintain stability and development through dialogue and international cooperation. Permanent interaction on the people-to-people level plays an important role by making a significant contribution to the stability and favorable social climate in the region, by diminishing the risk of conflict and by decreasing tensions through promoting tradition of good neighborhood, mutual trust and tolerance. It is crucial that both civil society organizations and government work together in supporting and strengthening public diplomacy within regional cooperation. The Baltic Sea state should recognize and strengthen the rule of cooperation on the level of civil society organization as an important and essential part of the Baltic Sea region transnational cooperation, as it provides a vast potential for creating a favorable social climate, providing stability and good neighborhood. It is necessary for the Baltic Sea Council member states to acknowledge a special status for cross and transborder regional cooperation between NGOs. The Baltic Sea state should provide an overall political and financial support for the international activities of social society organization in the Baltic Sea region, as well to create appropriate financial instruments for NGOs to realize concrete projects with the people-to-people priority area of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region and the Russian strategy of the social and economic development of the Northwest Federal District 2020. The forum stated that tolerance is a prerequisite for cultural and religious diversity, appreciation and understanding between people of different ethnic origins, and acceptance of sexual and gender minority rights. Tolerance means the right to practice a minority identity in a majority culture and the freedom to share views and beliefs in society. Respect for all human rights and freedom of speech, assembly and association are guaranteed by the international agreement of the United Nations, the Council of Europe and OSCE. These agreements are binding for all the Baltic Sea states. The Baltic Sea NGO Forum expressed its support to all civil society organizations and advocates who defend human rights and tolerance in the Baltic Sea region and beyond. We also call on a common effort on changing tolerance in the region and counteracting radical and extremist trends. We should strive to find new and efficient solutions to make our region a safer and comfortable place for its citizens. The Baltic Sea NGO Forum calls for incorporation of civil society NGOs in official action plan aiming the effort against human trafficking of labor in the Baltic Sea countries. That was the results of our discussion, and I thank for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graf. In the Council conclusions of last October, the involvement of civil society in the macro-regional strategies was also emphasized, so I'm very happy that there was a chance for you to come and join us and inform us of the conclusions of your forum. Thank you very much. Basically, the time is up, but if there is some reaction, some question, some comment to be made, I think we could take one or two still, if you are prepared to give up a little bit on the length of the coffee break. Do I see anybody wishing to take the floor? Yes, over there, please. So it's microphone 2 again.
Yeah, my name is Rolf Solvang, and I'm also in the NGO forum representing Norway as focal point. And it was very nice to be in this forum, and we are discuss also the premises for development in the region, and I want to point on the magic trick you always say, that it has to be growth to prosper. We are for the prosperity for all people, and even if the growth should, even in bad times, it's very important to take care of the people who are in need of special needs, and also poverty problems. That we have to have a society which is more equal, and that the strategy also should include some kind of social dimension, so that it's not so, even if there's much money, it does not help the society as a whole, that only some people gather money. And it's also to control the capital which is in the system. I think we have, in the future, can afford to pay pensions to people, but we maybe not can afford to put so much money out of the system and into tax havens and so on. So it's important that the social dimension come into the strategy, and that we are equality society. And I could say more about that. It's not in the Norwegian campaign for elections, every party says this. We have to take care of the welfare state to secure prosperity for all, every party.
Thank you. Thank you for this contribution. Thank you for reminding us of the social dimension. One of the objectives of the strategy is increasing prosperity, and reminding us of the social dimension is important. I think we can take one more question, but then I'm afraid we will have to finish. But I see a gentleman up there. Microphone 2 again, please.
Thank you. My name is Mikko Vienonen, and I represent the Northern Dimension Partnership in Public Health and Social Wellbeing, so I continue a little bit, but short. I have really tried to listen carefully, all the speakers, and the human dimension, and protecting the human capital has not been very much discussed about. And I would just like to remind us that we are living in an area where the younger generations in Europe are going to live a shorter life and be sicker than the older generation at this moment. I think that it is mentioned there, but none of the speakers really mentioned that. Thank you for you brought that up. But I think that we have to think about human health and social well-being as a capital, and if you don't focus it, this is going to be an economic catastrophe. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for this comment, and thank you for being so short. Well, perhaps because this plenary has concentrated on the governance issue, we haven't really covered all the topics or all the issues that are important to our region. But thank you for reminding us of this important issue as well. So I would be then closing this plenary, handing over in a moment to the two professional moderators standing here already behind me. I would just like to thank the panelists, those who already left and those who are still here with us, for your contributions. I would like to thank the audience also for the reactions and comments. I think we have managed to start a good debate on these governance issues, but I hope it does not finish here. I would encourage you to be in contact with your national contact points and pass on your ideas and messages on the report through them to the process that will lead to the Council conclusions then sometime in the autumn. I also advertise that there will be a parallel session right after the coffee break where we will be discussing these governance issues but comparing the experiences between the different macro-regional strategies. So those of you who feel that, oh, I didn't get enough governance discussion in this session, please join us at the parallel session. I am so fortunate that I have the two professional moderators here who have promised to draw the conclusions from this debate, so I hand over to them, and I'm curious to hear what the conclusions are. Thank you very much.
Thanks, you Timo. Very much. Thank you very much for your stunning performance here on stage. We were quite envious sitting in the audience. And if you sit in the audience, you have time to reflect a little bit more. That's for sure. And 2 or 3 things were striking to me. First of all, that it seems to be a testing time for the strategy for the Baltic Sea region, which in itself I think is perfectly fine. In a way, you know, the European Union is a performance-driven project. The Eurobarometer asks every month whether the Europeans support the project or not. So it's perfectly fine for us to examine whether the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region makes sense. But I think, you know, the time is perfect for this strategy to be advanced for several reasons. We are in the programming period for the next set of regional funds, so it is the right time to be thinking about synergies. We are entering a new institutional period in the European Union, and if as a region, which is not very populous, so its weight in political terms in the European Union is what it is. If we don't work together to put forward our ideas jointly, we won't have the relevant influence that we desire. Thirdly, we've heard in the State of the Region report that we get a premium for regional cooperation. I think this point was made very clear by Christian Kettles yesterday. So these are the reasons why the time is ripe for the strategy to be advanced. What we heard from the Commissioner was a plea for the 2 ends of the spectrum to be working together more closely. He called this the reverse multi-level governance, which is, I think, a great way of looking at this. Again, an experiment in the history of the European Union, which was in the earlier days very much, you know, driven from the top, and it was the prime ministers, the foreign ministers who were in charge. And now here comes the local level, which talks directly to the European Commission. The national governments sometimes feel envious about this, but they have to be integrated. I think that's a very clear conclusion from this session as well. Emily, what is next?
Yes, so next we have a brief coffee break until 11:30, and then we have the 6 parallel sessions following up. So in addition to the session on governance and other macro-regional strategies, learning from the other macro-regions, there's a session on Interreg funding for the next period, as well as 3 sessions on transport, water, and health sectors, the health economy. And finally, a session, as Pavel mentioned earlier, on the political state of the region report, where we were told to advertise a bit. There's a journalist from representing civil society in Ukraine participating in this session, speaking at this session. Then there's lunch, and we'll be back here, and we'll meet back here at 2 o'clock for the next plenary session of the day. Enjoy the rest of the morning.